Les Canadiens ont envoyé un message clair qui voulait que les gens travaillent ensemble au Parlement pour lutter contre les changements climatiques, pour aider avec le coût de la vie. Et c'est exactement ce que je vais faire. Canadians sent a clear message that they want their parliamentarians to work on things like affordability and the fight against climate change. I'm looking forward to working together with other parties and getting down to work.
On va passer aux questions. On a 30 minutes. Everyone's on the list already, so you don't have to raise your hand. If you don't have a question, I'm sorry, we don't have enough time. 30 minutes, on va commencer avec Canadian Press.
Good afternoon. Can you talk a little bit about the fact that you have no MPs elected in two provinces in Western Canada and how you're going to manage to represent Alberta and Saskatchewan in your government?
I think it's extremely important that the government works for all Canadians. And as I have endeavored to do over the past years, and as I will do even more now deliberately, I will be reaching out to leaders across the country. We'll be reaching out specifically to Westerners to hear from them. I spoke with both premiers of Alberta and Saskatchewan yesterday, but I'm also speaking with people like Mayor Naheed Nenshi and others to talk about how we can make sure that the concerns, the very real concerns of Albertans, are being addressed and reflected by this government. This is something that I take very seriously as a responsibility to ensure that we are moving forward in ways that benefit all Canadians, and I will be listening and working with a broad range of people to ensure that that happens.
To that end, you have promised and are in the process of building the Trans Mountain expansion. There are some parties that now potentially could help keep your government in power that oppose that pipeline. Is that pipeline on the table in order to keep your government in office?
We made the decision to move forward on the Trans Mountain pipeline expansion because it was in Canada's interest to do so, because the environment and the economy need to go together. We will be continuing with the Trans Mountain pipeline expansion.
Yep.
Bonjour, M. Trudeau, Michel Lamarche. J'aimerais savoir, vous avez dit lors de votre discours que vous aviez entendu le message des Québécois. C'est quoi le message que vous avez entendu lors des élections?
On va continuer de travailler fort sur les changements climatiques. Les Québécois veulent qu'on en fasse plus sur les changements climatiques et on va le faire. Les Québécois veulent qu'on continue à investir dans la culture, dans la protection de la langue française. On va le faire. Les Québécois veulent continuer d'avoir des voix fortes autour de la table de décision et on va s'assurer que ça se fasse.
Gouvernement minoritaire, êtes-vous prêt à travailler avec le Bloc, un parti souverainiste?
On est un parti farouchement fédéraliste et pour nous, l'unité du pays va toujours être une priorité. Mais il y a des enjeux sur lesquels, comme les changements climatiques, sur lesquels tous les Québécois et bien des Canadiens sont d'accord, qu'ils soient nationalistes ou fédéralistes nationalistes et souverainistes, ou souverainistes, en tout cas, on va pas tomber là-dedans. Tous les Québécois sont d'accord qu'il faut en faire plus sur les changements climatiques et sur des enjeux comme ça, je serais très content de pouvoir travailler avec le Bloc québécois.
Global, and please turn your phone off.
From Global, this election was a message from voters that they rejected you and your party's platform, and in a sense, the last 4 years of your work. A, did you get that message? And B, what are you going to do to convince voters that you're still the best person to lead their country?
I think Canadians sent the clear message that they expect their leaders to work together on the big issues that matter to them, two of them being the fight against climate change and affordability, cost of living for people right across the country as we work to build a better future for them all. I'm committed to working on that. Fortunately, those are big parts of our platform. But we're also going to work with other parties to ensure that we are making the right decisions for all Canadians.
It's been felt especially in the West, and in the past you said that Western alienation was just made up by politicians. Do you still believe that today?
I have been very, very clear in telling Canadians from coast to coast to coast that we need to recognize that Albertans and people in Saskatchewan have faced very difficult years. Over these past few years because of global commodity prices, because of challenges that they're facing that, for a long time they weren't able to get their resources to markets other than the United States. We are moving forward to solve some of those challenges, but it's going to take all Canadians sticking together, helping out folks who are struggling in places like Alberta and Saskatchewan. This is what Canadians expect of their government, and this is something that we're going to stay focused on.
Nice.
M. Trudeau, est-ce qu'il y a une certaine demande, en fait, des gens du Québec voudraient que vous nommiez un lieutenant politique au Québec? est-ce que c'est une idée que vous êtes prêt à considérer?
On va évidemment passer beaucoup de temps dans les jours à venir à réfléchir à comment on peut faire mieux, comment on doit faire mieux pour bien servir les Canadiens, bien servir les gens de toutes les régions. On a des semaines pour réfléchir à ça et on va prendre le temps pour s'assurer qu'on reflète les désirs de ceux qui ont voté pour nous et de ceux qui n'ont pas voté pour nous.
Et concernant la formation de votre cabinet, est-ce que vous avez une idée quand vous allez annoncer votre cabinet et est-ce que ce cabinet sera encore paritaire?
Oui, le cabinet sera paritaire et nous allons former ce cabinet et faire la sermentation le 20 novembre.
Hi, Prime Minister, will you seek a formal support arrangement with one of the other parties, or do you plan to just try to manage this minority parliament on a case-by-case basis?
I intend to sit down with all party leaders in the coming weeks to talk about their priorities, about how we can work together to respond to the preoccupations that Canadians have from one end of this country to the other. They will be various and varied conversations, but I can tell you it is not in our plans at all to form any sort of formal coalition, formal or informal coalition.
You said on election night that you felt you had a clear mandate from Canadians, but you've been reduced to a minority government, and your share of the vote was reduced substantially. So what lesson do you take from the fact that 1 million voters abandoned their party from the last election to now?
I think Canadians sent a clear message across the election of multiple parties that affordability and the fight against climate change are really clear priorities that they want this Parliament to work on. They also sent a clear message that they expect us as government to work with the other parties on these issues that matter to them, and that's exactly what we're going to do.
Presse canadienne.
Oui, M. Trudeau, dans votre discours lundi soir, donc, vous avez dit que vous avez entendu les Québécois. Et là, en réponse à ma collègue Michel, je n'ai entendu rien des 4 demandes de M. Legault. Est-ce que là-dessus, est-ce que vous avez changé quoi que ce soit votre opinion sur... Vous les connaissez, les 4 demandes?
J'ai eu une très bonne conversation avec M. Legault hier. On va continuer de travailler ensemble sur bien des enjeux qui préoccupent les Québécois, que ce soit l'immigration, que ce soit les infrastructures, des grands projets de transport collectif, le logement. Oui, il y a des enjeux sur lesquels on n'est pas tout à fait aligné, mais je me suis toujours engagé de travailler avec le gouvernement du Québec pour essayer de répondre de la bonne façon aux préoccupations des Québécois. Et on va continuer de le faire.
Donc, vous ne bougez pas sur ces 4-là, c'est ce que je comprends.
On a été très clair que nous voulions livrer pour les Québécois sur leurs priorités et je vais travailler avec le premier ministre Legault pour faire exactement ça.
Good afternoon. Just a clarification. You said that you would be announcing cabinet on the 20th of November. Is that also the same day as the speech from the throne, or is that at a later date?
No.
Do you have a date for that?
We will be swearing in cabinet on November 20th, and next decisions will be made in the coming days and weeks.
Now, you said the pipeline will go ahead, but how much leeway is there in your position to perhaps build it more slowly, reduce the scope? Is there any wiggle room at all, given the fact that the 3 parties are most likely to want to work with on some files or oppose this completely?
Right now, and for too long, we have been selling our natural resources to the United States at a discount. And that doesn't serve anyone. It certainly doesn't serve the transition and the investments in clean energy and fighting climate change that take resources and take money to be able to do. Getting our resources to markets other than the United States and getting that done as quickly as possible remains a priority for us. We put in place measures that allowed that project to move forward by doing more for the environment, more for oceans protection, better partnership with Indigenous peoples, because we need to get our resources to markets other than the United States in a safe and secure way, and that's what the Trans Mountain Pipeline will do. And then we will be able to invest all profits and revenues into this green energy and fighting climate change that Canadians expect us to act on.
Canada.
M. Trudeau, pendant toute la campagne, vous vous êtes servi des premiers ministres conservateurs provinciaux pour lancer des attaques.
comment vous allez faire pour rebâtir les ponts avec ces gens-là? Je pense particulièrement à M. Kenny. Est-ce que c'est même possible?
J'ai déjà eu de bonnes conversations avec plusieurs des premiers ministres conservateurs à travers le pays, dont Doug Ford, avec qui on a eu une conversation très cordiale. On est d'accord qu'il faut qu'on travaille sur les priorités, les enjeux auxquels font face les citoyens du pays. Et moi, j'ai toujours une approche collaborative que je préfère pour travailler avec les gens, pour livrer pour ce que leurs citoyens veulent.
Donnez-moi un exemple concret de compromis que vous êtes prêt à faire pour faire fonctionner le Parlement et travailler avec les partis d'opposition.
Je pense que le message que les Canadiens ont envoyé lundi soir m'a donné beaucoup de matière à réflexion. Et je m'engage à réfléchir de façon attentive et de façon profonde en consultant beaucoup de gens sur la meilleure façon de procéder. Je pense que c'est important de reconnaître que les Canadiens nous demandent de mieux travailler ensemble en tant que parlementaires. Et je m'engage à faire ça et on va avoir évidemment plus à dire au fil qu'évoluent ces réflexions.
Heather Schofield from the Toronto Star. So as you move to accommodate other parties' demands into your governing, do you plan to open up the fiscal taps a little bit, or how do you plan to keep the deficit and spending under control?
Canadians gave me a lot to think about on Monday night as they returned us in government, but with a clear requirement to work with other parties on the priorities that Canadians spoke clearly to during the election campaign, particularly affordability and the fight against climate change. And I'm going to take the time necessary to really reflect on how best to serve Canadians and how to work with those other parties. I think that's what the people who voted for me and the people who didn't vote for me expect, and I'm going to make sure that we get down to work by doing that.
Follow up, sir. You've said now that you think all Canadians have to work towards keeping the country together, united. Specifically, what do you expect the premiers, Kenny and Moe, to do, and what do you expect Conservative provincial leaders to do?
I expect premiers Kenny and Moe and all premiers to stand up for the interests of their citizens. That's their job. And people in Alberta and Saskatchewan have been suffering and struggling because of circumstances beyond their control. And we have, over the past few years, endeavored to be supportive. We have endeavored to get those resources to new markets, and we're well advancing on that. But there is more we need to do, and I look forward to conversations with all premiers across the country about what the next things we should be doing to better serve Canadians.
You've applied for a judicial review of the Human Rights Tribunal decision for compensating Indigenous children. If $40,000 is too much, what price would you put on children harmed by the system?
I've been clear. I agree with the tribunal in the need for compensation for people who've been through horrific situations. This is something that we are going to work on and ensure that we are delivering proper compensation. The way we did following the 60s scoop, the way we did around TB, the way we did around forced relocations and day schools. Ours is a government that understands taking responsibility for mistakes made in the past. But we've also committed to move forward on the historic child and family services legislation and empower and give the funding to Indigenous communities to ensure that kids in care continue to remain within their communities, within their identity, within their culture and language. That is something that is extremely important, and that's what we're committed to moving forward on.
In order to get the compensation right, you said that you would want to have conversations with partners, leaders, and communities. Could you elaborate on that?
I was pleased to have good conversations this morning with both Natan Obed and Perry Bellegarde. We will continue to engage with Indigenous leadership across the country, Indigenous communities, strong voices to ensure that reconciliation isn't just a word that we use, but we continue the concrete actions we've taken over the past 4 years and do even more to make sure that the partnership and respect that is so necessary as we move forward with Indigenous peoples in this country is at the core of everything we do.
tout à l'heure, en réponse à ma collègue de TVA, que le message envoyé par les Québécois portait sur le changement climatique. Mais si on entend M. François Legault, lui dit que le message des Québécois portait sur la loi 21. Alors, j'aimerais savoir, est-ce que vous partagez son constat? Et si oui, quel message croyez-vous que les Québécois vous ont envoyé sur cette question? Est-ce que c'est de nature à faire changer votre position?
Ma position a toujours été très claire. Nous n'allions pas intervenir à ce stade-ci sur la loi 21, mais je ne vais pas fermer la porte à une éventuelle intervention parce qu'un gouvernement fédéral ne doit jamais fermer la porte à pouvoir défendre les droits fondamentaux, que ce soit les droits des femmes, que ce soit les droits des francophones hors Québec, des minorités religieuses, des communautés LGBT. On se doit d'être là, de pouvoir défendre les droits.
Croyez-vous que les Québécois vous ont envoyé un message là-dessus? Est-ce qu'ils vous ont puni à cause de ce que vous venez de répéter aujourd'hui?
C'était un enjeu parmi plusieurs dans la campagne électorale et effectivement, nous allons toujours écouter les perspectives avancées par différents citoyens. Mais j'ai été moi-même avec 500 000 gens dans les rues de ma ville, à Montréal, qui disaient que la priorité, c'est d'avoir un gouvernement qui va lutter contre les changements climatiques. Et maintenant, on a un Parlement et un gouvernement où l'engagement est ferme d'en faire plus pour lutter contre les changements climatiques.
Can you give us an example of a time when you were able to compromise with the other parties?
No, I've worked closely with other parties over the past 4 years and will do even more so. That was the message that Canadians sent on Monday night. And I look forward to sitting down with the other party leaders in the coming weeks to talk about how we're going to get down to work in collaboration with other parties.
Though have characterized your approach as a my way or the highway approach, I'm wondering if there's actually an example that shows you can take a different approach, that shows you can actually do what you're saying Canadians are expecting of you.
I think in a lot of the things we've done over this first mandate, whether it was moving forward on the Canada Child Benefit that lifted hundreds of thousands of people out of poverty, particularly kids, moving forward on a national housing strategy, moving forward on lowering taxes for the middle class and raising them on the wealthiest 1%. These are all things upon which there would be a broad consensus in the House or a positive consensus from progressive parties. In the last Parliament, progressive parties voted against those measures. I expect them to be able to vote with us on things like the very first thing we will do, which will be putting forward a bill to lower taxes for the middle class.
Times?
It's me. Prime Minister, you have a few vacancies in the Senate right now, a few more on the way. How quickly do you plan to fill them?
We have created an independent process of advice to the Prime Minister on filling those vacancies in a responsible way based on merit and not based on partisanship. And we will ensure that we're moving forward in an appropriate way on filling those vacancies with the right people.
Do you still plan on changing the Parliament of Canada Act and the way it addresses the Senate?
Yes.
Prime Minister, two quick reconciliation questions. Incarceration rates among Indigenous population. The prisons have been called the new residential schools. What bold action can you commit to properly addressing this file going forward?
We're going to continue to work with Indigenous leadership on their priorities. We recognize that incarceration rates are unacceptable for Indigenous peoples. There is not a single easy answer. The answers involve investments with communities and things like housing in terms of mental health and medical supports, addictions treatments, but also education, opportunities, infrastructure, economic development. There are many, many factors that go into this, but there's also a need to look carefully at our justice system and look at how we can improve our justice system so that we are not further criminalizing and penalizing specific portions of the population.
And what's your message to Italian Canadians who are looking for that final and formal apology in the House of Commons, promise that you made before the election? What do you say to them?
I keep my promises, and we will be moving forward with that.
Monsieur Trudeau, j'aimerais revenir sur la loi 21, sur la question de ma collègue du devoir. Monsieur Legault a dit que vous n'aviez pas la légitimité d'intervenir dans une contestation de cette loi-là, étant donné vos résultats au Québec. Est-ce que vous pensez que vous avez cette légitimité-là?
Je pense qu'un gouvernement fédéral et un premier ministre a toujours la responsabilité de défendre les droits fondamentaux. J'ai toujours été très clair sur ce point-là avec les Québécois, avec tous les Canadiens, que ce soit les droits des femmes, que ce soit les droits des francophones minoritaires en dehors du Québec, comme on était prêt à le faire dans le cas des coupures pour les services francophones en Ontario qui avait été annoncé. Nous allons toujours être là pour décider si on va ou non intervenir pour défendre les droits fondamentaux. C'est ce que tous les Canadiens s'attendent d'un gouvernement fédéral et c'est ce qu'on va faire. Mais on ne va pas s'engager à ce stade-ci. On va prendre des décisions si on va s'engager basées sur la situation et les conditions. Mais non, je ne fermerai pas la porte et j'ai été très, très clair à ce point-là pendant la campagne, à maintes reprises. Je ne peux pas fermer la porte à défendre les droits fondamentaux.
Sur vos 100 premiers jours, les Canadiens vont scruter à la loupe ce que vous allez faire, les premiers gestes que vous allez poser. Vous avez mentionné un projet de loi que vous avez l'intention de déposer. Quelles sont les autres priorités pour les 100 premiers jours?
Notre première priorité, ça va être de baisser les impôts de la classe moyenne. Comme on avait promis de le faire dans notre plateforme électorale. Les autres choses vont répondre aux différentes priorités qu'on a mis de l'avant. On reconnaît le besoin de travailler sur l'aide médicale à mourir en dedans des 6 mois du délai établi par la Cour. On va travailler sur le coût de la vie. On va travailler et avancer sur les changements climatiques. On va travailler sur les enjeux auxquels les Canadiens ont indiqué clairement qu'on doit travailler ensemble.
CTV.
Prime Minister Kevin Gallagher, CTV News. So, 2015, you won a majority with hope and inclusion. This election, we saw a divisive, nasty campaign that was largely based around fear of the other opponent's agenda. How do you intend to heal the wounds that we see along regional lines between Western Canadian provinces and the growing nationalist sentiment in Quebec?
I think many of us regret the tone and the divisiveness and the disinformation that were all too present features of this past election campaign. I think Canadians expect us to work together, to listen to each other, to figure out a way to move forward that isn't as divisive and challenging as this election was. I think there were a lot of issues that weren't properly addressed. I think there were big, substantive ideas that weren't fully debated in this election campaign, and I regret that, and I recognize that much of this campaign tended to be around me, and I do hold a bit of responsibility for that. But this Parliament and this government will be and needs to be focused on Canadians. And that means we need to work together. We need to listen to each other. We need to figure out the right path forward for every part of the country. And that is something that I am committed to doing.
You said you've called the Western premiers, but I'm wondering, without MPs in Saskatchewan and Alberta, how will you provide regional representation in your next cabinet?
That's one of the things that we're going to be reflecting on in the coming days. I think any government needs to make sure that it is hearing from every corner of the country, and not all governments in history have had representations from every corner of the country. There have been different approaches taken. I'm going to be reflective on how we move forward in the right way. But I have already indicated in my conversations with Nahid Nenshi and my upcoming conversations with people like Don Iveson and Charlie Clark and Michael Fougere and others, that I very much want to hear the concerns that folks are experiencing and the solutions that they have to put forward for a part of the country that has faced some very difficult times over the past years. I continued to get out to Alberta as much as I could, go to Saskatchewan over the past years to listen, to engage, to work, and we're going to continue to make sure that every part of this country sees its priorities reflected in what this government does, even if we don't have members of the government elected in those regions.
Avec The freelance.
Prime Minister, the President of the European Union sent out a very friendly tweet to you, and I'm wondering, how do you want to strengthen the EU-Canada and EU transatlantic relation and the multilateral approach, and will you increase foreign aid to the threshold that Canada had promised years ago?
We are, of course, going to be continuing to work with friends and partners, not just across the Atlantic, but around the world on the big issues that matter to everyone, whether it be climate change or strengthening democracies or making sure that everyone has a real and fair chance to succeed around the world. These are things that we obviously have strong alignment with many European friends and partners, but we continue to engage around the world on these issues that do have an impact in the lives of Canadians, but in all of the futures of our kids and grandkids. I'm going to continue to ensure that Canada is engaging responsibly and appropriately in the world.
No one from Maclean's. National Post.
Hi, Prime Minister. Why do you think that your party got totally wiped out in Alberta and Saskatchewan in this election?
I think there's a lot of thinking to do on that, and a lot of listening to Albertans, as I have endeavored to do over the past number of years. But obviously, I'm going to have to do a lot more to ensure that not. Why did this happen is not the central issue we have. The central issue for me is how do we move forward in a way that responds to the concerns that Albertans and Saskatchewanians have clearly expressed. This is something that matters to me, and we're going to work very, very hard to ensure that this government acts in ways that benefits everyone across the country.
Is there anything that you feel you might have done differently over the last 4 years to maintain a higher level of support in Alberta?
I think the decisions that we took over the past years have been focused on the best interests of the entire country, including the initiative that saw us purchasing the Trans Mountain Pipeline as a way of ensuring that we would be able to get Alberta and Saskatchewan oil resources to markets other than the United States. We recognize that there is a frustration with the economic challenges being faced by Albertans, and my focus as a government is going to be on responding to those preoccupations the way we're going to be working to make life more affordable for all Canadians. But we need to recognize that different parts of the country go through different challenges, and making sure we're really listening to them is something that is going to be key for me.
National Observer.
Prime Minister, the Trump administration has filed a lawsuit against California challenging its cap-and-trade regime with Quebec. Would your government support Quebec in this legal challenge against the Trump administration?
I don't know the details enough of what that challenge is and what impacts it will have on not Ontario but on Quebec now. But it is certainly something we're going to look at very, very carefully. Quebec has a long demonstrated leadership in the fight against climate change, like BC, in Canada, and we're going to make sure that we are continuing to fight climate change across this country in ways that we can.
And you mentioned you wanted to make sure reconciliation isn't just a word. That is what many, as you might know, is people have accused you of thinking. Is that something you've reflected on, of those accusations? And what do you mean when you say you want to make sure reconciliation isn't just a word?
Well, I've heard the critiques that we need to be doing more, and I agree with them. I am impatient as well about closing the gaps, about moving forward on economic opportunities, on better support and Indigenous-led systems of support for their communities. But I recognize at the same time that we have taken significant steps, whether it was 87 long-term boil water advisories lifted, and we're on track to eliminating all of them. We have closed the funding gap. We have reached parity on education in K-12 for Indigenous communities. We have moved forward in a meaningful way on a broad range of issues and local successes across the country on reconciliation. But there is much more to do, and I was very pleased to speak with National Chief Perry Bellegarde this morning, who highlighted again how pleased he was that this past government has done more for Indigenous Canadians and Indigenous communities than any government in history, but that we need to keep working and do even more, and I entirely agree. And that is going to be my focus on Indigenous relations, because no relationship is more important to me than the one with Canada's Indigenous peoples.
If we make it quickly, we have time for two quick ones. So Jason Unrow.
Thank you. This is a bit of a foreign policy one. This past summer, pro-democracy Hong Kong demonstrations, a bit of a backlash spilled over into Vancouver, where we had Canadian citizens being threatened on the streets by pro-mainland supporters. Given this and the aggressive nature of the regime itself towards Canada, our agriculture, and that it's day 317 for Canadians Spavor and Kovrig, is your government prepared to take a stronger stance against China?
One of the very first things I did this morning was sit down with both my chief of staff and the clerk of the Privy Council to talk about some of the challenges we're going to be looking at in the coming weeks and indeed in the coming years. I also got a full briefing from our National Security and Intelligence Advisor who addressed these issues and others. Obviously, through this election campaign, I have continued to keep an eye on the situation around the world, including the difficult situation these two Canadians who've been arbitrarily detained are facing, and the 300,000 Canadians living in Hong Kong, and the concerns that we have around respect for human rights and a de-escalation there. I'm going to continue to reflect and engage with experts as we look to move forward as a government that will continue to stand up for human rights, stand up for Canada's interests, but also ensure that countries around the world continue to defend the rule of law and the values that Canada stands for. And we've been pleased to see so many of our allies standing up for Canadian interests and the interests of those Canadians being detained.
Would you be willing to go to do something like cancel Chinese visas as a sort of a retort?
I look forward to sitting down with and checking in with our experts who've been working hard over these past weeks on this China file, including Dominic Barton, our new ambassador to China.
Beaucoup attaqué M. Ford pendant les élections. Vous avez dit lui avoir parlé récemment. Sur quel point vous pouvez vous entendre, sachant qu'on sait que déjà sur la question des changements climatiques, ce ne sera peut-être pas nécessairement le cas?
On a parlé des investissements que nous pouvons faire ensemble dans les infrastructures, dans l'appui pour le transport collectif. Nous avons travaillé ensemble déjà sur les enjeux du commerce international et les relations avec les États-Unis. Nous reconnaissons et nous avons fait l'engagement de travailler avec le Premier ministre Ford sur l'Université de l'Ontario francophone. Nous allons continuer de travailler avec M. Ford, avec tous les premiers ministres des provinces qui sont intéressés à collaborer avec nous. Et je sais que sur plusieurs enjeux, tous les premiers ministres des provinces veulent travailler main dans la main avec le gouvernement fédéral. C'est juste une question de trouver et de développer ces enjeux-là pour qu'on puisse avancer en servant bien tous les Canadiens.
Une modernisation de la loi sur les langues officielles dans les 6 mois, est-ce que c'est réalisable?
Oui.
Merci beaucoup.
Merci tout le monde. À la prochaine. Merci.